Hello and welcome back to the channel. Amber here, and today I'm going to go over some of the questions that are left in my comment section. And earlier in the season, I encouraged people to drop in comments and questions, and I'll try and come back around during the episodes to answer them. So I've kind of compiled a few that I thought were interesting or at least fun to talk about. As always, you can find me on Discord, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And if you'd like to help support the channel, check out Road to Tarvalon on Patreon and YouTube memberships. Also, if you would like to help support the channel even more, you can go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. So let's get into it. So our first question here is from Halfling 1968, and they say, I hope we get some explanation why the Shido are all in black. Otherwise, it does not make any sense that the Aiel should use that. And I think they mean do that. But I think this was a choice that where instead of just taking the traditional garb and outfits from the Aiel in the books, what they're doing is using it more as a visual aid to kind of pinpoint the focus on, hey, this other group of Aiel are not the same as all of the others that we've been seeing up until this point, where we have Ruark and the Wise Ones, and they're very helpful to Rand's cause. They're leading him into this journey and supporting him in a way. And then we get the introduction of the Shaido, which are a very tumultuous, a bit more of a warring clan where their ideals don't necessarily line up with the other Aiel that we have seen thus far. So having them in a different costume that kind of represents that, I think is just a way to get new viewers and non-book readers to understand that, like these ones are not like the others. And I think it's really just as simple as that. The next question is from a book reader comment, so possible spoiler. And I'm not going to spoil anything here, but Karen Holmes says, what did you think of Morgase in the cold opening? I didn't like it. Part of what made Andor a great nation is that they believe in the rule of law and that the monarch isn't a tyrant. They can call for the execution of their rivals. I have no idea why they would more I have no idea why they would make Morgase into a psychopath. Okay. So before I get into any more, I see what this person is saying. I don't think this makes Morgase a psychopath. So on one hand, yes, like it's very visceral, it's very gory and bloody, and a lot of people have this very idealistic vision of Morgase, this, very generous, kind ruler. And in this commenter's eyes, they saw this moment as making her a tyrant. I could understand why this might ruffle some people's feathers, but I also want to focus in on a bigger theme of the story in terms of Morgase as a parent and her connection with Elaine and the connection to how important the daughter heir of Andor actually is. Because as we've seen, Morgase went through this succession war. And even in the books, we are told that Morgase, she's not this humble, dainty woman, okay? Like she is a very tenacious and political ruler that can't be underestimated. I mean, there are characters where she has banned them out of her sight, saying, if you ever show up in Andor, I will kill you on sight. And this is someone she actually cared about. So I think like there are many aspects of Morgase to look at here. I don't think she's a tyrant per se for doing this. I think this is more of an intentional focus on her as a mother and how much she feels for her daughter in terms of protecting her and protecting her claim. Because succession is a bloody, dangerous thing. If these people are left out in the world as an opponent for Elaine when she comes into power, she's kind of wiping that off the board. And, maybe you should say, okay, she should have killed everyone then, like leave no one in those families alive. And I mean, we don't know what happens. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. There's also this Elida aspect where it's kind of like questioning what was Elida's role in this, because as you see, Elida's like putting the crown on Morgaze. So you also kind of have to ask yourself, is there more to it? And I mean, we don't know where Morgaze's storyline is going to go and how much it's going to line up with the book. So I don't think it was necessarily a bad call. And I don't necessarily think that this makes her a psychopath, because when you look at it as a more familial thing, it's asking the question, what would you do to protect your child? This person is reacting to an event and doing something out of love and protection. I don't think that makes her a psychopath or a tyrant, but just a more gray, interesting character. I don't love it or hate it, but I do think it's fine, you know? So there's many aspects to it, but I don't think it's really that big of a deal. And also, like, as a book reader, I was really surprised. So when Morgaze, she goes ham and she's like killing a child, it's very shocking, and I think going into the season, they really have to pull all of the punches and really get people to take notice of the show, and we're still waiting on a season 4 green light, so I think adding a little shock value isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, like, I enjoy Morgaze. I don't think this really colors my perspective of her any more than it's just showing, like, what would she actually do to protect her children, and so, yeah. So the next comment is from Ryan, and they said, "I love how dangerous the Forsaken are. After 3,000 years of imprisonment, they're immediately becoming wealthy, influential, and knowledgeable in this world, despite coming from a futuristic and advanced civilization. It highlights their intelligence, even amidst all the bickering and backstabbing. I think each Forsaken covets Ishamael's rank as nameless, as it not only signifies the Dark One's favor, but also grants absolute authority over all of the Forsaken, Dark Friends, and Shadowspawn, regardless of their personal allegiances. However, what they fail to realize is that the Dark One does not bestow this rank on any power hungry opportunist exploiting their dark allegiance, only to someone who truly believes in the shadow and its cause." And I love this comment so much because the Forsaken have so much potential, right? Like, they're so powerful. They are so, I would say, almost like overpowered in terms of our characters that we see who can channel and, use magic. But what we're setting up here in the show is, this like bickering aspect, especially in the opener of season 3. That cold open was fire, in my opinion. The bickering and the backstabbing is really highlighting this big question that's going to be going through the entire series, and it's who's going to become nameless, and what does that entail? How does one gain this position, and what is it good for? And so having this setup where we've got Ravine, who's just right in the mix, immediately dropped in the most wealthy nation, the most powerful nation, and starting chaos, right? He's got everyone under his compulsion. Everyone thinks he's this really great guy. The scene he shares with Elaine was one of my favorites in that episode, where it's so wholesome and it's so like you get this real like loving dynamic between the two, and then there's this plot twist of, oh my god, Ravine is not this guy that we thought he was. But I do think this is a really great comment. I just wanted to touch on it. I don't have too many things to say about it, but I just thought it was really well thought out, and a good observation. The next one from Jeffrey: Sister Tula making houses extinct across the Imperium. If you have not watched Dune Prophecy, the actress that plays Morgase also plays a character in Dune Prophecy where she has a very similar plot point happen. I don't want to spoil the show for you, but this actress is killing it. I really, really enjoy the actress that plays Morgase a lot. So, this next comment, yeah, hold on. Okay. This person was not happy with the show and with the season, I guess. Truly flipping terrible. All this shacking up with people who have never slept together, and Lan's mother's ring give me strength. Okay, it's fine if you don't like this show. I would highly recommend taking part in any other activity that doesn't make you so emotional. But Lan giving his mother's ring actually happened earlier in the books. I wanna say it's around it's in the Great Hunt, think chapter 8. I looked it up earlier. This is like a very emotional, like wonderful part of the story. And I'm confused why this person is upset with Lan's mother's ring because that is like one of the highlights of the relationship between Lan and Nynaeve. She wears this ring, my God, like throughout the entire season on a string on her chest. And it's so significant to the story, and while I'm not gonna spoil anything here, but this ring and what it means for Malkier and what it means for the Malkieran people is so important, and the beholder of this ring is someone to be observed with reverence and someone who can say, "Hey, like this means something and requests something." So Lan giving that to Nynaeve now, I mean, that lines up with the books. It happens even a little bit earlier in the books than what we're seeing on this show. And it's a truly, truly significant moment and aspect of Nynaeve's story. So them having a problem with that, I'm not quite sure what the issue is, but we'll have to see. If you've read the books, I mean, you know what this ring means. You know where it comes in later and how important it is. And it's one of the most quoted moments of the entire series. So I don't know, Kato. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I'm sorry. Okay, going to Corey. And this comment says, okay. So this implies the Aiel deliberately chose to move to a desert and live like this. Just making sure because as a show only person, I've been wondering why these people live in such a harsh environment when they can clearly travel to much more habitable areas without issue. I was curious if they were banished there, or if there's some secret thing that they're protecting or whatever, because we've seen these characters can travel pretty far on foot, and it didn't seem like anyone was preventing them from leaving. I love this question so much because it is like it's a very good observation. And the very short answer is this should be something that is absolutely laid out to you later in the story, especially if you're reading the books. I can't really speak about the show, but a non spoiler answer is yes, this culture living in the desert is a punishment in a way and a reminder of something that happened very early on in the beginning, like the origin story of this culture. So it's kind of like a an atonement for something that has been done in the past. And it's a really beautiful segment of the story. I think this is a really interesting aspect to the culture of the Aiel, and it's definitely one of those book storylines that so many book readers love. So, Corey, read the books or keep watching. Possibly it should be answered in a way, I think, this season. And so, this next comment is from Technically I'm Here. Love that. They said, "I believe 100% that Verin is in fact Mesaana the Forsaken. I have not read the books, but my educated guess is that she didn't lose her marbles when Naomi reveals she's a dark friend. Verin fits the description of Mesaana." This is very interesting, and I think this is such a fun theory. I think one of my favorite aspects to the books and the show is this lingering question of who are the dark friends? Who has sworn their allegiance to the shadow? Who are the Forsaken? And as we meet more people throughout the series and more influential people throughout the series, there's a lot of Forsaken essentially hiding in plain sight. Mesaana hasn't yet been named in the show, I believe. We've only had Semirag and Grendel so far, and they, like, not haven't seen them yet, but they've been named. I'm not sure if they're going to include Mesaana, to be honest. I do think Mesaana does have a very important part to the story, but again, there might be some shifting of things, and the aspect of Verin not being affected under Naomi's compulsion is very interesting and mysterious as well. But I will say this, like, no spoilers here, but Verin is one of the most highly intelligent characters in the entire story. She is very often 3 steps ahead, and she's very good at hiding her intelligence behind, she's pretty charming, pretty matter of fact. And so I think with Varen, the one thing to always focus in on is how she reacts to things. So this moment of Naomi hitting her with compulsion, and in like a split second, Varen kind of blocks it, right? If you slow down that clip really, really slow, you can see she uses a cutting weave and just kind of like deflects it, the compulsion in a way. And so, is that a dark friend tactic? Is that a Forsaken tactic? Maybe, or maybe Varen is just super highly intelligent and saw something coming and was ready for it. We will have to wait and see. The last thing that I wanted to touch on wasn't an actual comment that was in my comment section, but I just did a episode with Preston Jacobs on his channel and was kind of going through the comments over there. I didn't clip it, but it was someone who was bringing up the Stone of Tear and why it was silly to not include it first, because in the books, if we go chronologically, the Stone of Tear happens before the events in the Aiel Waste and Ruidion. And so, to me, moving the Stone of Tear to a later date makes perfect sense, because the storyline of Kalendor is kind of all over the place from like a narrative structure and a chronological structure, because we get the Stone of Tear, we get the sword, and then like the sword is kind of like stored. They put wards on it, and then our entire group goes off to a different location, and then we're waiting however long it is for Kalendor to become relevant to the story, and not just this almost like MacGuffin. Like, we got to go get it because it's important for prophecy, but then we're just going to leave it here and come back to it later. So I think the rearrangement here of moving the Stone of Tyr and Kalendor to a later date where we can actually get more exposition about Kalendor and understand what it can be used for and how powerful it is, and actually use it and see it in action, rather than just like, hey, we got it, and then like putting it back and coming back to it like much later. So I think, overall there's going to be a lot of changes within the show, because it's really, I mean, look at this logically, right? We've got 14, 15 books of this series, and they're condensing it into 8 seasons. If the showrunner gets what he wants and we get all 8 seasons, we will see. But there's so much being condensed, and I think a lot of people are feeling that with the pacing of these first 3 episodes. But to make sure that we are getting the time we need for these big moments, I think rearranging things isn't such a terrible idea. That way you can get to something like the Stone of Tear, and it's not just like, oh, like season finale, we got the Stone of Tear, we've got Kalendor, right? Like, I think it would make sense to get that and then actually spend time on its use and why it's important. And so I just think in terms of adaptation, yeah, we're going to see changes. But my intention going into this season and last season as well is not so much focus on the books per se, but to actually look at it as its own thing. And that's obviously always difficult because I've read the books, I love the books, I care about the books, but separating the two has made the show much more enjoyable. But I'm also always kind of interested on how the show is created and how they're making things work in this new aspect in a visual medium. And so changes don't really bother me that much when I can see the logic behind them. There was one last comment, I forgot to clip it, but it was someone asking more about the gray man and the shadow spawn. And I went into it in one of my videos, and the gray men are another type of shadow spawn. We've only seen two so far in the show. We have the Trollocs, which are like animal, a human animal hybrid, and the Forsaken who made these creatures used channeling and kind of like a manipulation of their soul and DNA and genetics and created this hybrid. And then the Fade are kind of like these one-off offspring of the Trollocs where, like, once in a while, they'll give this is so gross, but, like, give birth to a Fade, and then, like, the Fades are even more powerful than the Trollocs, and there's so many other shadow spawn, like, there's something called a Zomara, which is, like, this androgynous humanoid character that doesn't remember anything, like, moments after something happens, and they're typically used as, like, servants of Dark Friends and the Forsaken. That way, like, any plan that is laid out in their presence is forgotten. There's also other shadow spawn, like the Drakkar, which is very, like, vampiric. It's like this winged humanoid creature that it's also kind of taking from this, like, mythological creature of a siren, so something that can kind of, like, croon and sing to you and put you under its trance, and we've got all of these other creatures, but the gray men are just essentially a human that has willingly given its soul to the side of the shadow to become almost like this faceless assassin. And so they're not invisible, but they can kind of lurk about and they're not really taken notice of. It's just another one of these world building aspects with like the crazy creatures that we get in the Wheel of Time. I'm so happy to see another one of the Shadow Spawn. So, I mean, there's all different types of things that Robert Jordan has taken from mythology and kind of compacted his world full of these weird, creepy creatures. And not the drag car, the gray man is just another one of them. And I think going forward, maybe we'll see more. I mean, the Shan-Chen actually have like winged creatures. They're kind of like dragons, more like pterodactyls that like they're like transport units. So like you have people riding on them and you have them actually like transporting things. There's so much wild stuff like that in the book. So if that's something you're interested in, highly recommended. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't often like get on here and just off the cuff talk about stuff. I don't always know if I feel like super confident doing it, but I do have a lot of fun and I think I'll keep doing this if everyone keeps feeding me questions and topics to talk about. So I would love to continue. And thanks so much for listening. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I hope to keep putting out episodes this season. If I can keep my pace on things, it's so much work getting these episodes written out, recorded, and edited. And it's such a time crunch. And I'm doing my best, but I'm absolutely loving it and loving all of the interactions, especially in my comment section. So I hope everyone's having a great week. Please like, please subscribe, and I will see you back next time.